Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. Good afternoon to my brothers and sisters, friends in the Western Hemisphere, and good evening to my brothers and sisters and friends in South Africa. We want to welcome all of our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Salaakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. This afternoon and the evening in South Africa, we have a very special topic that we want to deal with, along with some very special guests. I am literally just getting off the road. So I didn't have time to pull up the bios and touch them up a little bit for what we needed to present on each one of the guests for today's program. So given the fact that all three of these guests are personal friends of mine, I'm going to let them say a little something about themselves after they are introduced. Let me first note that the topic for today is a very important topic, especially given all that has transpired over the past few days. I mean, the whole world is talking about what just happened in Washington, D.C. And what happened in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill relates. It relates to the issue that we are going to be dealing with today. And you'll be able to see that connection very clearly as we get into our conversation. The topic for today is when justice is denied, the struggle must continue. Now, the first guest that I'm going to have a one-on-one with, the way we're going to do this today, I'm going to have a one-on-one with each guest for a few minutes, for about 10 to 15 minutes max. And then we're going to leave the remainder of the time for discussion with all three of them together. First up is a good friend of mine, Dorothy Copp Elliott. Dorothy, and I'd like for you to bring her on screen now, Brother Sadiq. As we were, first of all, greetings of peace to you. Good afternoon, Dorothy.
Greetings to you too, Mauri.
As we were just back in the early to mid 90s, as we were just beginning to come to what was a successful conclusion, and it was a long overdue struggle, conclusion to the case of Terrence Johnson, a case out of Prince George's County, Maryland. Another tragedy involving Prince George's County police erupted in the county. And this tragedy touched you and your family directly. Why don't we begin, Dorothy, with you walking the audience through what happened on that fateful June afternoon, and it was 1993, was it not?
Yes, it was. I'm Dorothy Copp Elliott, and I represent the Committee for Justice for Archie Elliot III. It just so happens that Archie was killed the day before my birthday. He had been out that night with a friend of his in the district planning my birthday. And on the 18th of June, he had gone to work He worked on a construction job in Virginia, and he was on his way home. Excuse me. He was on his way home, and we lived less than 3 minutes from where the initial pullover occurred, which was in a residential area. And my son was wearing only shorts, no shirt, no socks, but tennis shoes. And that was the way he had left his job, because I'm sure he wore the appropriate gear when he was on the construction job. He had been drinking. He was intoxicated, as the autopsy report showed. The officer, who happened to have been a municipal police officer, Jason Levitt, pulled him over at the intersection of Kipling Parkway and Marbury Drive in District Heights. And we actually live about 8 miles from the nation's capital. My son complied with the officer, did everything he asked him to do. He was subsequently searched. No contraband was found. He was left sitting on the curb at that intersection for a very long time until backup came. They put him in the front seat of the cruiser after handcuffing him with his hands behind his back. Mind you, the front seat of the cruiser. And the cruiser had dark tinted windows, which were rolled up. And my son was seat belted in the car, doors were locked, and the officer stood talking to backup, who was Officer Wayne Cheney of the Prince George's County Police Department in Prince George's County, Maryland. They alleged that Artie pointed a handgun at them. They actually lied in court, federal court, and said that Artie pointed the gun out the window. And Judge Peter Massetti said, "How could that be? You just said the windows were rolled up." So that was one of their many lies that were told. But they fired 22 times at my son. And 14 bullets struck him. And when he was lying on the ground, people saw that there was no weapon anywhere. And it took a long time for the fire department to come, or the ambulance, and that was just maybe 3 minutes away. And they said they tried to cover him with some plastic, and you could see the blood just coming out of his body. And they took him to the hospital. I didn't know my son was dead until many hours later. And that was because the girl's car that he was driving that day recognized her car, on the TV, because she was parked. My son had parked the car behind the police cruiser. And there was a ride along too that day, and I'll get back to him. But when she saw her car, she recognized it, and she went to the police headquarters, and they may have had his driver's license or something, but she said Archie was driving her car that day. And I had been shopping for linen for my son, and I said, I have to get the right kind. He didn't like a lot of flowers and things, and I bought the linen that I thought he really would love. And I came home, and my younger son, who was almost 12 at the time, we were going to go to a movie. And then for some reason, we came back home, and it wasn't long before that I started getting phone calls asking, do you have a son named Archie Elliott? I said, yes. And they said, we're coming over. And they said that 2 or 3 times. So I said, he's dead, isn't he? And that was just something that I instinctively knew, that if he had been injured, they would have told me that. If he had been in an accident, they would have said he's at such and such a hospital. So that's how I found out that my son had been killed.
And I want to note for the viewers that right to the left of Dorothy in the picture frame is a photograph of her son, Archie Elliot III. This was, for me, when you and I first met, around the time that this tragedy unfolded, it was an unspeakable and horrendous tragedy for me that just flew in the face of credibility that the official narrative that was given. Again, as you just pointed out, the fact that he had been already placed under arrest and was handcuffed under seatbelt restraints in a police cruiser. And at the end of the day, the officers involved in his killing were not held accountable. It was deemed justifiable. Let me ask you, it's been many years, 1993, it's been quite a number of years. 27 years. And this has been an ongoing struggle for you. You have campaigned, for justice for your son and for your family for all these years consistently. And, this is how you and I met. And where are things now, given the fact that there is so much attention on the issue of policing in the United States? Where are things now with this campaign for accountability for Archie Elliott III? And we're going to come back to this later when we bring Jonathan on for discussion as well. But for now, where are things?
Okay, Mauri, I remember when you encouraged me to speak out, because at first I was a little reluctant. But as far as the Prince George's County Police Department is concerned, the case has been closed long ago, probably at least 2 years after they started their so-called investigation. But for me, it will never be over. And that's why I continued to keep his name out there. We held, for 6 months, we held prayer vigils at the site where he was killed. And it was to honor his memory, but also to try to make contact with people who were passing this residential area. Judge Archie Elliott and I went out and tried to talk to witnesses who may have been around at the time. But remember, this was near the 4th of July, and a lot of people heard the shooting, but they thought it was just early fireworks. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get some names and phone numbers and just information from people who were passing by. And we passed that on to our attorney, the renowned R. Kenneth Mundy, who passed away about 2 years after my son was killed. And when he looked at the photographs of my son's picture that were taken at the funeral home, he asked me to go out of the room because my nephew was there with me. And when I came back, he was very visibly shaking and said that these officers are not only going to get jail time, they're going to be kicked off the force. Well, as luck would have it, when Mr. Mundy died, we did not have adequate legal representation after that. It was appealed to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, and they sided with the police officers, qualified immunity, no charges whatsoever. And after that investigation from the Homicide Division, the police department, and they said no charges. They were not indicted. Wayne Chaney, the black officer, killed again 20 months later. He fired one shot at this Caucasian gentleman, Michael Donald Reed, who was 33 years old. Very little publicity about that. But I was getting calls constantly from the media because anytime anything happened concerning the police, they would call and ask my opinion and how I felt about certain things. But if anyone could have seen those bullet holes in that cruiser, everybody believed that those officers would have been charged. I didn't have any doubt that they were not going to be held accountable. But again, don't believe in local justice from the police department. Don't believe in justice from the state side, even the Justice Department, because when they declined to indict, Judge Elliott and I were there with Albert Wynn, Congressman Albert Wynn at the time, Congressman Bobby Scott, who's still a representative from Virginia, which is where Judge Elliott is from, Artie's father. And he said, if you can't get justice from the highest court in the land, where do you go to get it? And I believe that police officers are only looking out for themselves. They don't aggressively pursue homicides by police officers. They don't even want an outside prosecutor to come in and look at it with a fresh set of eyes that have not become friends with the local police officers and the state's attorney's office. So we have petitioned the new state's attorney, which is about 3 of them since Artie was killed. She promised to look at the case. And maybe they looked at the old evidence, didn't interview anybody, did nothing, and said, you know, we can't bring any charges. So I started a petition. It has almost 5,000 signatures. And I believe we'll have one more meeting with the state's attorney. And after that, hell is going to break loose because we're not going to stand for this injustice.
Okay, my sister. Listen, I want you to stay with us, inshallah. We're going to bring on now Jacob Blake, the father of another victim of police brutality in Wisconsin. The case of the Elliott family stems from 1993. The case of your family, my brother, is very recent and has already garnered a lot of national and some international attention. Let me share with you and the audience a very important point of fact that underscores the providence of the Creator. When I reached out to you a few days ago to invite you to be on this program, brother, when I spoke to you, wallahi, Allah is my witness, I did not know of the most recent development in this case. I didn't know until after I spoke with you and you agreed to come on the program and talk about where things are. After you and I spoke, I went online. I immediately went online and I just wanted to pull up some fresh information, and subhanAllah, that is when I saw the decision that had just been made. After I spoke with you, the decision that had just been made in the case. Why don't we begin by you first sharing a little bit of something about yourself, and then getting right into, for the sake of those who don't know who Jacob Blake is or may have forgotten, what the crux of this tragedy involving your family is all about.
Okay, well, so first of all, Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam, my brother. Yes, we should have started with that.
My name is Yaqub Jacob Blake. My father was a civil rights minister. He marched from Selma to Montgomery. I was raised understanding the importance of civil rights and what we had to do to fight to get our rights. My children are all aware of what their grandfather did. I went to all black college, Winston-Salem State University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We didn't call them HS, what do they call them now? HSB, whatever they call them now.
Whatever they call it,
black
HSBC,
colleges.
yeah, black colleges, yeah.
Whatever. We went to a black college, man.
Right.
So we had chicken 3 times a day. That's how you know you had a black college.
Yeah, mashallah.
Understanding how important it is to keep fighting for civil rights based on the color of my skin. Um, my son was breaking up a dispute between his girlfriend and another lady, and she had called the police, and there was a big hoopla and about the keys for the car, and the policeman took advantage of a situation to shoot my son, who was trying. It was a hot day, and the children were in the back of the car, and he wanted to turn on the AC, or he was checking on the kids. Had nothing to do with him fleeing or doing anything to the police. Uh, they followed him around the car with their guns out, and one of the officer that shot him, grabbed his shirt, which I'm sure they could have done way before he started shooting. They could have tackled him.
Right.
Now, I would have rather you beat my son up than you put my son in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. That was not what was needed. There was 7 shots in his back. But Allah saw fit for my son not to leave here, but for my son to be made an example, for them to look at what they've done. Because now they must look at my son when he comes into the courtroom in the condition that they put him into. They did not press charges on the police, and that's what we're coming. I'll see you soon, inshallah, brother, because we'll be in DC Friday. We must strike down the immunity that the police possess until, and it's in the George Floyd bill, but we must push to get that bill made into a law, because it strikes down the immunity of the police, because they almost have it now where it's impossible to charge a policeman for what they do unless it's totally overboard, like in the George Floyd case, or like in the case in Ohio. There's been so many cases that were overboard. Tamir Rice. Now, no one can explain to me how they shot that little boy and the car had never stopped moving. There's so many.
Within seconds, yes.
You cannot fathom the way a father feels when he sits there and he watches what someone who believes they're above the law can do. Because you understand, there's a Bill of Rights for the police. Then there's a Bill of Rights that are for people in the United States. So why are the police held in such high esteem, and people, regular people, they work for us. So we must understand that what happened this week, what we witnessed happened in DC, is real. That's real.
Right.
It's real. That's what we're up against, the two systems. The system that we're in, and then the system that they have. That's what we're up against.
Okay. Now your son, Jacob Blake Jr., was shot 7 times in the back.
7.
By a police officer. And the officer they just recently made a decision. The decision was what, brother? In the case?
The decision was that he wouldn't be charged. State would not charge him.
Now, is there still a federal investigation? Is there still a federal investigation going on? There's
still a federal investigation, yes.
But the state has decided that there is no probable cause to charge him with any crime after he shot an unarmed man 7 times in the back.
7 times in the back. Well, based on how racist Wisconsin is as a state, and based on the threats that were made on my life the whole time we were in Wisconsin, we'll let you. How could you make threats on my life when all I'm doing is standing up and speaking out for my son? Right. So we knew what Wisconsin had in store for us. Mm-hmm. So it was no surprise when that came down. It was no surprise.
Okay, my brother, I want you to stay with us. Next
yes.
up, I want to bring in to the conversation my brother Jonathan Wesley Hutto. He is a Prince George's County, Maryland activist, organizer, and activist around issues of police accountability and justice. He has been one of the pillars of support for our sister Dorothy Copp Elliott and her family's ongoing struggle for justice in the Archie Elliot III case, as well as a number of other cases and issues relating to police. Let me begin by inviting you to do the same, brother. Just share a little bit more background information on yourself and what you've been doing in PG County over the past few years, and then we can pick up from there, inshallah, God willing.
Thank you so much, Brother Mauri, and for the invitation to come on, and a salute to the listening audience. I know the audience is an audience of practitioners, organizers, and peacemakers, not peacekeepers, but peacemakers throughout the world. I embraced my calling as a human rights organizer and advocate as an undergraduate student at Howard University, got engaged on the yard, as we say. And February 17th, 1998 was a watershed moment in my development. It was the day that, as the president of the Howard University Student Government, we brought back on that campus a revolutionary, arguably the greatest revolutionary that came off of that yard, known to my mother's generation as Stokely Carmichael, to my generation's Kwame Ture, 9 months before he passed. And he dropped some dictums on us that day that are foundational to me at this very hour. One of those dictums is that the struggle is eternal, that there is no time for us to just simply kick back, relax, and enjoy life. That if we thought that way, it was reactionary thinking. That the more we struggle, the more we know, the more we can do, and that our people are going to need us to do until we die. And so it is in that vein, and with that trajectory, that upon graduating from Howard University in 1999, I took on my first job as a community organizer for the ACLU, and part of my mission was to help build a group of stakeholders in Prince George's County. It was a very focused mission to focus on reforming the Citizens Complaint Oversight Panel, the panel charged with reviewing police misconduct complaints. It was within that thrust that I met and came across the Enough is Enough movement, which was the frontline movement at that time. Joe Madison, Walter Frontroy, you was involved in that movement as well. Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, Stephanie Joseph, many others were the late Dick Gregory. It was a very robust movement. It was a movement that had just come off of 6 months, nearly 6 months of continuous protests at then State's Attorney Jack Johnson's office. I got involved with the struggle as it was progressing to the state capitol. So this was my baptism. My baptism of fire was the case of Archie Elliot III. And coming back to that theme of Kwame saying the struggle is eternal. 2+ decades later, I was in my early 20s then. I'm in my early 40s now. And we are still not only fighting for justice in the Archie Elliott case, but there have been cases, plural, locally in Prince George's County since the Archie Elliott case. We have seen an iteration of cases, an iteration of struggles, an iteration of movements. We have actually come full circle to see Stephanie Moore, who was the only officer from that early period where I was involved in my early 20s, who was indicted and jailed as a result of police brutality, in that case, sicking canines on homeless Latino men in Langley Park. She was indicted. She was convicted in 2001, and nearly 2 decades later, on his way out the door, she was pardoned by President Trump. So again, our situation is one that is colonial. You already know it's colonial. We are an oppressed people. Let's just be clear about that. And we're not oppressed because we're an inferior people. We are oppressed because our oppressors are better organized than we are, as we saw the other day in Washington as they stormed the Capitol. But not only are they better organized, they are supported and backed by the state. That's clear in terms of the way the police deal with white supremacy and entrenched racism, and the way they deal with us who have been historical victims, but we are the survivors as well.
Tell me this. You mentioned the name Jack Johnson. He was the first, if I remember correctly, first African-American county executive. Was he not? He was the first.
He was Jack Johnson was the
or was he the second? He was the second. Okay.
African-American executive.
Okay. He was the second. There was some expectation. In fact, I forgot the name of the first African-American county executive. Do you remember his name?
Wayne Curry.
Wayne Curry. That's who it was. Yes, yes. There was some guarded optimism when Wayne Curry became the first African-American county executive in Prince George's County, one of the, if not the wealthiest, predominantly African-American county in the country. And then him followed by Jack Johnson, who had previously been a state's attorney, the state's attorney for Prince George's County. There was some guarded optimism that there was going to be significant change, significant positive change in the way that justice was meted out, especially when it came to issues like this. Have you seen significant change? I mean, there has been some change. I have a quote. In fact, if I can, I remember when we were campaigning for Terrence Johnson for his release, and he finally won it after 17 years of political imprisonment. We were doing some research on the county, on the history of the county, and what many folks are not aware of is that you know, I mean, that's part of the Mason-Dixon line, and you know, there's a lot of history. I mean, one of the police officers that died the night that they brutalized Terrence Johnson was a Claggett. Claggett is a family that goes way back to the founding of Maryland as, you know, one of the colonies. It's a place that has a lot of history. And back in the day when we were doing the work around Terrence's case, and then a number of other cases began to come up. I remember coming across a quote that found its way into the book that we published, Criminal Justice in America, subtitled The Political Imprisonment of Terrence Johnson. And that quote was actually a boast. It was a direct quote from the FOP of Prince George's County, where they boasted of taking, they took pride in being known, along with Rizzo's crew in Philadelphia, as being one of the most racist and brutal police departments in the country. Now, if you were to talk with, you know, some of the police executives and guys on the force now, of course, they would make the argument that much has changed, and no doubt much has changed. But because of the way that this stuff is institutionalized to protect the quote unquote bad apples, much has not changed. What is your view on that, brother? On the Prince George's County of yesterday and the Prince George's County Police Department of today?
Oh, I think I mean you laid it out pretty clearly, Mauri. The change that I mean, what is taking place in Prince George's County is a microcosm of what is taking place throughout the country in certain urban centers. I was my formative years, my foundational years, from the time I was born until I came up here to go to Howard University, was in Atlanta, Georgia, a city that was termed the city too busy to hate. This was the same era in the early 1980s. Chicago elected its first African-American mayor, Harold Washington, who had been president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, former congressman. This was Coleman Young out of Detroit. This was Tom Bradley out of Los Angeles. Mayor David Dinkins in the late 1980s. But in each and every one of these cities I just named, entrenched racism, the symbolic ascension of electoral Black leadership, no matter where you analyze it, anywhere in the country, did not lead to any eradication of that class stratification engulfed with deep racism and with police departments that served as colonial guard dogs and gatekeepers against our lives. Disproportionately Black and poor on the margins. Tom Bradley elected in 1982 in Los Angeles. 10 years later, Los Angeles exploded. Rodney King. In Chicago, Harold Washington elected. Right. 2 decades later, you're getting reparations for survivors of torture in Chicago. The notorious police commissioner Berg, who beat the living HELL out of our people, disproportionately Black men in Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia. The city too busy to hate. This city exploded in the aftermath of Rodney King, and it exploded again just recently in the aftermath of George and Breonna Taylor and a Black African-American female mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, admonishing her constituents in the streets to go home. And so to bring this back to Prince George's County, our baptism into understanding that dynamic was the case of Prince Carmen Jones. I was remarking to the professor, Jared Ball out of Morgan State, that this was a political education for us, because this is what it said. And Archie Elliott's case said the same thing, the son of a judge and retired school teacher. The case of Gary Hopkins, the son of a Bank of America president. These cases, this is what these cases said to us, because oftentimes they try to argue this class dynamic in the African-American community, this question of moral responsibility and ethic. Prince Carmen Jones was an extension of the Black elite in this country. Prince Carmen Jones went to private, majority white military academies in Texas. Prince Carmen Jones was a graduate of Howard University on his way to Officer Candidate School in the United States Navy. Nothing in Prince Carmen Jones' resume equaled or equated or gave any sort of cogent argument to what took place to him that day, September 1st, 2000, in Fairfax County, Virginia, when 6 bullets shot through that car, 5 of them piercing his back by an African-American police officer named Carlton Jones. But what that case taught us was that even if you are an extension of the Black elite, if you find yourself on the other side of that revolver from a police officer, you're not going to get any protection at all from the Black electoral class. Wayne Curry did not speak out. Jack Johnson did not speak out. The state's attorney in Fairfax County did not indict. And the last act of Gerald Wilson, who was the first African-American police chief at that time, was to exonerate Carlton Jones of any responsibility in that case. That was our baptism of fire at that point. So coming years, decades later now, Dorothy Elliott was made a promise when Aisha Bradeboy ran for office. She promised Dorothy that she would get her the files. We were in front of the state's attorney's office in 2005. Glenn Ivey was the state's attorney then, attempting to protest for these files. I'm going to end with this. The case of Ronnie White. This is a case that's very dear to all of us, very dear to Dorothy. Every time you talk to Dorothy, she talks about Ronnie White, a young African-American male who was having some trouble, some serious problems, was incarcerated, put in a cell. He had seriously injured another Prince George County police officer with a car. And what they did was they took retribution on Ronnie White's life. It was around the 2007-8 time frame, and he was choked to death in that cell. The camera was turned off. But the most egregious, most reprehensible aspect of this, I mean, in here, was that Glenn Ivey, not only did he not seek an indictment, and we all know a state's attorney can get an indictment. Not only did he not seek an indictment, he passed the buck to the Department of Justice to come in. And these are the people that aspire to higher electoral office in the county. It's the reason why progressives have got to dig into that process, if you will.
Absolutely. Okay, let's bring all three of our guests back together on screen. And let me begin with a question to Dorothy and to Jacob. Do you know each other? Have you met, the two of you?
No.
For the commitment march, I listened to him, but I've never met him, close up in person. And I'm so sorry that I won't say that they did not bring charges against that particular officer. It breaks my heart to hear that.
Thank you so much. I have not met the distinguished lady, and I plan on meeting her, God willing, inshallah, this week. I'll be in D.C.
You said this coming
we have
Friday,
to make
huh?
some things happen. This coming Friday.
How long do you expect to be in town?
We'll
Maybe
be
we
in town all the way up until the day after the inaugural.
Oh, okay. All right. So inshallah ta'ala, God willing, we can get together and
Inshallah.
yeah. I wanna put to both you and to Dorothy first. Right now, all of the political pundits, the politicians, the pundits, the historians, the sociologists, the activists on all fronts, civil liberties, human rights, and much of the world has been focused on the drama that played out this week on Capitol Hill. And not just because, an out of control POTUS, President of the United States, engaged in rhetoric that was inflammatory. He deliberately, called for exactly what we saw, a disruption of a political process that is supposed to end with the formal election of a new president and a changing of the guard, in the Oval Office. He called for a disruption, and this disruption took place. And now there are 5 people that have died. There were a number of people injured. There is the possibility that there may be others that may succumb to their injuries in the days ahead. People are talking about, historians are comparing what happened to what happened in 18 whatever it was, when the loyalists that were connected to the mother country at that time, England, disrupted the processes on Capitol Hill. This is the second time this has happened. There has been an attempt, an insurrection, they're calling it.
Insurrection.
One of the thoughts that came to mind for me, apart from, viewing what happened within the scope of African American history and struggle, was the possibility on the positive side, there could be a silver lining to this. It gives, folk who up until now refused to remove their rose-colored glasses when it came to police and policing, and you had a number of different agencies, police agencies involved in this melee, because this was Capitol Hill. This was Capitol Hill. So, but it gives an opportunity for people to see police that actually went along with the program, that there were police that facilitated the attempt at, you know, a permanent disruption and basically a political coup. There were police officers of different agencies that facilitated that opened doors, that removed barriers. It provided an opportunity. What are your thoughts in terms of the prospects for what the country and the world witnessed being able to be used as a tool for generating more pressure for long overdue reform in the way policing is done in America? First, you, Dorothy.
Well, you would think that the Capitol never would have been breached. Where was our security? And where is all this top level intelligence that could have prevented it? It reminded me of 9/11. And for us to say that we're the strongest country, we have the best intelligence there is to figure out who is against us and who's going to attack us. How come they didn't foresee that? Could they have prevented 9/11? Could they have prevented the breach of the Capitol? It was pure barbaricism, terrorism, and I just couldn't believe it. So look at who you have in office, the man who should not be there. And there's so many adjectives that I can attribute to him, but you know most of them, and I'm sure you're just like all the others. He needs to go. He should never have been in that office. Never, ever. Given the way he behaved long before the election was over, and when you had at least 16 or so Republicans vying for that office, how come he stood out more so than anybody else? I don't believe that it's over for Trump and his naive supporters. And he's just like Jim Jones in Guyana when he allowed all of those people or coerced them, or maybe they came willingly to their death by drinking the Kool-Aid. So what is going to happen to the U.S. now? What is our image like? Will it be restored again? There are some of our allies who believe that Trump instigated all of it. And if he hadn't spoken the way he has spoken over these 4 years, or looked out for the interests of his well-connected friends, we would not have had the breach of the Capitol on January 6th.
Brother Yaqub, your thoughts?
I cannot wait to meet this lady. She just went up 7 steps. I just talked to my mother yesterday about the purple Kool-Aid that these people have drank. They drank the purple Kool-Aid. And that's how they walked through that city and went into the Congress and into the Senate. They were high on purple Kool-Aid. They drank it. It's a cult. It is a cult. And he should have never been able to do this to our country. But they allowed this to happen because of the systematic racism that dwells here in this country. He cracked the door, then once he cracked the door, they bulled right on through. Right on through. I'm in total agreement with what she just said.
Brother Jonathan, is this an opportunity for the side for truth and for justice, you know, to exert pressure? Now that eyes have been further opened, you know, the rose-colored glasses have been removed from probably millions of others who saw policing in just a very narrow, one-dimensional way. They're the good guys on our side protecting us. Your thoughts, brother?
Oh, no question about it. But we have to take this moment, and as the late Malcolm El-Hajj Malik taught us, Brother Omawali, that out of all of our subjects, history is best qualified to reward our
research. That's right.
And so we have to be clear that we are human rights advocates and human rights fighters, but we believe in all humanity. We have to draw the line on fascism. You know, I'm actually in debates and dialogues with folks right now who are struggling with it, because at our core, we do believe in civil liberties and First Amendment rights. But we know that it was because of these rights that existed in Germany 100 years ago that small minority party, the Nationalist Socialist Party of Germany, that was marginal within the beer halls. They had their little champion named Adolf Hitler. They were able to use those civil liberties, penetrate the government, and build a movement to give people a sense of how dangerous this is. What we witnessed at the Capitol the other day is actually more broad and deeper within the American conscience and within the American populace right now than the Nazis were 100 years ago. So we have to build within people's minds that yes, we need the study groups, yes, we need the conversations, but we're going to have to confront this menace head on.
We have,
and that slogan of what the Holocaust survivors said, never again. There were 6 million Jews that were totally wiped out, but along with 6 million Jews, 11 million people total. They came for the trade unionists. They came for blacks. They came for the so-called Roma, the gypsies. They came for the Jehovah's Witnesses. They came for the intellectuals. You know, so we have to put in people's mind that the alarm has been sounded. There is a populace of people in the United States of America right now who have no respect at all for any notions of democracy. Our Black lives are already at risk within this fragile democracy that we're in. Any march towards fascism is a march towards a final solution. And who do we think the final solution is going to be against? So yes, the alarm has been sounded. The antennas are up. As the late Kwame Ture trained us on more, we have to organize. So I'm gonna say this: if you're not in an organization, you got to get into an organization. Mauri Salaakhan has an organization, the Afia Foundation, Peace and Justice. Get in the organization. We have an organization on the ground in Prince George's County, the Prince George's People's Coalition. Brother Jacob got an organization there. I'm sure he's about to shout it out in a minute. We've got to build. We got to get some boots on the ground. That's the only way we're gonna bring about the society that we must have in order to move forward.
Okay, as I knew would be the case, time has really flown with this discussion. I want to give each of you 2 minutes to share whatever closing thoughts you want to make on this subject of police accountability and the accountability that we need to see within ourselves if there's going to be positive change. Let us begin with Sister Dorothy. Whatever you want to say as a final thought in 2 minutes.
Thinking of the name of the group that was formed whereby recommendations were made, and I think there were some 66 of them, and everybody who's in the county needs to look over those recommendations and see which ones should be implemented, see which ones should be totally discarded, and just make sure that action applies, accountability applies. We don't need new laws, I don't think. We just need to enforce those that are there. And we also need for police to realize that they're not superior to us. They're not superior to the people that they serve. And every time they see a Black young man who has done something or a traffic violation, that is no reason for that person to lose his or her life. And I think one of those recommendations deals with whenever there is an infraction or a policeman sees something wrong with a traffic situation, for them not to even bother the person, but to get the information and send them a letter or something so that you know that there will be no interaction between the police and the person that they stop. And even Geraldo, when he had me on his show, it was titled, "Is a Traffic Stop a Death Sentence for Young Black Men?" And I believe that to be true today, that they're out to not protect us, but in some cases to beat people up and to show who's boss, and they know they're going to get away with it.
Is there any contact information you'd want to give to the audience for folks who might want to contact you, Dorothy?
They can go to the website, I think is www.justice for Archie Elliott. And I can, there is also the petition. And one other thing that's important for me, being a former educator, I believe that the scholarship fund that I started for students to attend HBCUs will greatly benefit those students. And also it will keep the memory of Archie alive. So how do I send that information to you? Just send it to you, Mauri?
Yeah, just send it to me and I will include it in the link for this program when we send it out through mass distribution.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Brother Jacob, Yakub.
Now we started calling ourselves the Four Families. That was the Blake family, the Breonna Taylor family, George Floyd's family, Eric Gardner's family, and there was a family up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, the Cole family. Now we're at about 15, so we're not the Four Families anymore. There was never a closed door. We want as many families that have been affected by the police as possible to join with us, because we must stand together. Our unity speaks volumes. We have to be united as families and come as a force. That force will be met and has to be reckoned with. Who better than the families that have been affected to march forward with this torch? We have a bill on the floor that needs to be forward. Once we take away police immunity, once we get to that point, then we'll keep going. We're not asking, brother. Astaghfirullah, I'm not asking these people. We are demanding. We've waited long enough to put ourselves in a position on the backs of our children to make change happen. We can no longer wait to be spread fed. We need results. We will be there in DC as people that owe us. And I'm coming to collect on that check that Martin Luther King talked about long time ago. So we coming to collect. So they're not going to be able to push us away and get rid of us. I'm not going anywhere. It's way larger than my son. It's way larger. This is really our people that look. As I look at these four pictures that look like us. So if us don't take care of us, where will us be?
Any contact information?
And we're working on We're working on our website as I speak.
Okay.
I will definitely get back to you so that you can publish the website. The young fella is working on it right now.
Okay, great.
And I appreciate, and I am in awe of everyone on this show, and I love you. I have to say that I love you all, and strength and power. Inshallah.
Love back at you, my brother. Jonathan, closing thoughts, brother.
Yeah, so thank you again, Mauri, for bringing us together. And Jacob, appreciate that message you put out, and Mama Dorothy, eternal love to all of us. Just real quickly, one of the things that I shared the other day as the insurrection that was being called was taking place was I said to people, I said, one of the most uncomfortable things to realize about this as you watch this, as the emotions are flowing, is one of the things we're witnessing, whether you like it or not, is a group of people who are united in their purpose. They're clear from their perspective of who their enemies are, who they believe their enemies are. They have organized themselves. They have ingrained a racist ideology, and now they're instituting programs for it. And what it really showed is on our side how fragmented we are, how much time we spend fighting and cutting down each other. Right before the election, too many of the messages going against Ice Cube, for example, we may agree to disagree on some of those people and their messages. But the notion that we don't understand who our common enemy and our common foes are. So I want to end with this message here from George Jackson that he put in Blood in My Eye. This was his political treatise. George Jackson, who is considered by many to have been the foundation of the prison abolitionist movement in this country, when he left us with these words before he was assassinated there in 1971 in San Quentin, he said simply to settle your quarrels, come together, understand the real, true reality of our situation, understand that fascism is here, that millions have died that could have been saved, and that millions more would die and live half butchered, poor lives if we fail to act. Do what must be done. Embrace your love and humanity, and in worldwide revolution, join us. Join the People's Coalition. Join us. Join the Committee for Justice. Join us. Join the Afia Foundation. Join us. Join Brother Jacob Blake and his posse out there in Kenosha. Join us. Join us. And give up your life for the people.
Do you have a contact information you'd like to share now or later?
I'll share it now. Look us up, the Prince George's People's Coalition on Facebook. That's our Facebook page, the Prince George's People's Coalition. And I will give you my email later, okay, Mauri, that you can send out to the listening audience. And thank you again.
You're very welcome, my brother. Let me conclude this broadcast by pointing out, first of all, that this was not intended to be an anti-police forum, and I don't think it was. In fact, I know it wasn't. I want to point out for those who may view it otherwise, especially given some of the remarks that I made, that, I have a son who's on the police force in Washington, D.C., in fact. He's been on the force for a number of years. I pray for him often, that he is protected on both sides of this unfortunate challenge that we have in this country. I have a brother who was on the police force for many years, ended up retiring from the force under a tremendous amount of pressure because he was a good officer who didn't stand for the stuff that he saw. And in New England, in southern New England, they gave him a case that he ended up winning. But after winning that case, that was an attempt to set him up because of the posture that he had for many years as a police officer, a good police officer that was respected by the citizenry in the areas that he served. He decided to retire, and we were very happy for that. So again, and I don't know if any of you are, in fact, I know Dorothy knows Ron Hampton. Was the is the executive director, and so does Jonathan. He's a good man, a good police officer who was very conscious and used the years of observation and expertise that he brought to the table in an effort to try to make things better, to make police more accountable. So, we're not anti-police. We recognize the good police officers out there, and in fact, the work that we're doing is an effort to try to protect the good ones as well as the community as a whole. But in conclusion, I just want to remind our brothers and sisters of the need for struggle. The title of this program was When Justice is Denied, the Struggle Must Continue. Frantz Fanon, that brilliant psychiatrist from Martinique, who wrote the book, one of the books was Wretched of the Earth. He wrote in that book, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. We urge our brothers and sisters out there, especially our young brothers and sisters, you know, to of all tribes, to be conscious of the responsibility that you have to be agents of change. And one of the things that I admire about what our brother Jonathan is doing out there in Prince George's County is that he has he reminds me, the work that, alhamdulillah, you all have been doing in Prince George's County reminds me a lot of the Rainbow Coalition that was produced by the late Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was a very powerful, in fact, he, in my opinion, was one of the most powerful and dynamic Black Panthers. And the reason why he ended up being targeted was because he had the ability to speak to the people, to a diverse array of people, and bring this diverse array of people together. So this is something that we must do. I'll conclude with a verse from the Quran in English that is relative to this issue, and one in Arabic and English translation, but we always close out with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah the Most High and the Most Glorified, the Creator who is known by many different names and many different cultures around the world, but the one God has said in the Quran, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves. This is the responsibility that we have as human beings, and this will make the world a better world if we can move toward implementing this mandate given in the Quran. In fact, a mandate that can be found at Harvard University over one of its doors. Stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves, from the Prophet Muhammad. From Allah in the Quran. And then we have, as a closing dua, a prayer, we want to close out with in Arabic, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Wal Asr, Innal Insana Lafi Khusr, Illa Alladina Amanu wa Amalu Solihati, wa Tawasaw bil Haqq, wa Tawasaw bis Sabr. Which means, in translation, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, verily humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. May the struggle continue. Thank you for joining us. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. A luta continua.
Wa alaikum salam.
All right.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank y'all so much. Love y'all. On with it, folks.
Thank you, Mauri. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Mr. Blake.
Love you, my Dorothy. On the move.
Thank you.
All right. Love you.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm going to end.